Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here. Thank you. That was an easy clap. My name is Damien Mu. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the CEO of AIA Australia. And my job here this morning is to firstly thank you for making time to come along for what we hope will be a very valuable discussion. I'll come back to you at the end of the session to my call for action because there is some requirements that I have of all of you today as well. But mine is to really welcome you to the AIA Vitality Summit, an inaugural Vitality Summit, one that we look to continue the discussion in many years to come over this important issue of how we can improve the nation's health. AIA Australia, for those of you who don't know us, are the second largest life insurer in Australia, and we insure about 3.5 million working Australians. And we get to see firsthand some of the issues of the health trends that are affecting our country, and we want to do something about it, working together with you to turn that trend around. We also, just to give you a bit of insight, our mission is to be the best in life, and our purpose is to make a difference in people's lives. And we think we do that well through life insurance by being there for them and their families when they need it. But how can we extend that relationship to, once they've got that in place, working with our financial advisors and superannuation funds to ensure people have that protection, to then go the next step of engaging them to hopefully not need that by living a longer, happier life, healthier life. And that's what really today's discussion is about, because there's three objectives. One, to raise the awareness and acknowledge the truths, which is that we do have some concerns when it comes to the health status of Australia. The rate of diabetes is doubling. If you look at the obesity levels, they're rising. And we need to accept that trend so that we can actually then do something about it. So we want to raise the awareness around that. Secondly, this is actually a message of hope, not fear, because the great news for Australia is, if you look at the Oxford Health Alliance, there are three fundamental lifestyle choices around healthy eating, drinking, smoking and exercise that cause 4 of the chronic diseases that cause 60% of deaths worldwide. Now in Australia it's 90%, but that's actually a good thing, because what it means is, due to the infrastructure we have, the clean air that we take for granted, the clean water, the fantastic options of food and nutrition, and the fact that we have a very manageable population in terms of connectedness, it means that we can actually make changes that will change that outcome. So it's in our hands, people. But we need action. So that's the second one. And the third one is to connect for you the role of financial services in improving the nation's health. And many people say to me, well, what do you mean by that? And why would financial services do that? Well, there's a good reason. That's what today's esteemed presenters will talk to you about. But it's really about looking at how we can extend our relationship beyond helping people have that financial plan and protection in place, to then engage them on a very relevant discussion around how we can then help them achieve their financial goals in the health status that they aspire to. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome our facilitator, Sylvia Jeffries, who will be well known to you all, who will introduce our panel members and enjoy the discussion. I'll see you afterwards. Thank you. Thank you, Sylvia. Thank you.
Thank you, Damien, and good morning to everyone. I've never been a facilitator before, so I'm very excited about this. And I'm sure to many of you, this is a new format, a new concept that we are endeavouring to bring to you today. But it's certainly a very exciting one. You're in for a very engaging and a very informative and educational experience, I do hope. Entertaining as well, fingers crossed. A very good morning also to the many people who are streaming with us online this morning. We're very tech savvy here today. There are about 15 live sites, I think, across the country this morning. And if anyone here in the room or at home watching as well wants to engage in this conversation, you can get involved on the hashtag AIA Vitality Summit. It's not an event without a hashtag these days. Now, we have some leaders from here in Australia as well as overseas as well, who are going to take us through many of the conversations today, many of the big questions that you might have about health and wellbeing and how they are connected to wealth as well and the financial sector. So we will bring them down in a minute. But why did I want to be involved with this today? Well, health and wellbeing and wealth. I do very much enjoy all of the above, but I've become a lot more, I suppose, invested in health and wellbeing in the last 2 years of my life. 2 years ago, I took up the role as newsreader with the Today Show. The most frequently asked question I receive these days now is, what time do you get up in the morning? The answer is 3:15. That's my first alarm. 3:17 is my second alarm. 3:26 is probably the time I actually literally get out of bed. Have a shower, get into work by 4 a.m. So I go to bed about 7:30 in the evening, 8 o'clock on a crazy night after watching maybe an episode of House of Cards. But it's the hours in between the bedtime and the alarm clock that are crucial to me now. Sarah Wilson will be joining us shortly, but getting off sugar in the last few months for me has been crucial. I was told in my first week of my job by a sleep expert that sleep deprivation and 3 o'clock alarm clocks were going to contribute to mood swings, to weight gain. Both happened in the first 6 months of the job. She also told me that I was probably going to have trouble falling pregnant when that time came in my life, and that it was probably going to shave a few years off my life expectancy as well. So that was a pretty bleak prediction in my first week of a job that I hoped would last potentially decades if I don't stuff up on air. So I figured I had to make the most of what I've got and look after myself as best I can, and I have been very focused on that in the last 2 years. So today's conversation is something that interests me and is very important to me, as I'm sure it is to everyone here and everyone watching at home as well. So without further ado, I will introduce to you today our experts who are here to unpack all of these issues with us. And we begin today with Mark Tucker, the Executive Director and the Group Chief Executive Officer and President of AIA Group Limited. Please welcome Mark Tucker. Morning to you, Mark. We also have Adrian Gore, the man who founded Discovery in 1992 with a simple and core purpose: making people healthier and enhancing and protecting their lives. Adrian Gore. Welcome. Sarah Wilson, the New York Times best-selling author and director of the I Quit Sugar online wellness program, which has helped more than 1.2 million people quit sugar worldwide. Ivy Watley joins us next, Executive General Manager of Customer Experience and Insights at Sun Super, a fund with 1 million members and $30 billion in funds under management. Welcome, Ivy. Richard Peel joins us this morning, co-founder of Australia's #1 health club, Anytime Fitness. Good morning, Richard. And Dr. Lisa Studdard, First Assistant Secretary of the Population Health and Sport Division in the Department of Health. Welcome, Lisa. Welcome to our panellists this morning. Take your seat in what we like to call the boxing ring. Now, we've got a lot to discuss first, and of course, as we were saying earlier, this is an engaging and a robust discussion, so please feel free to disagree with your fellow panellists and tell us your thoughts and don't hold back. Our first conversation this morning is all about why wellbeing matters, the economic and the social case for wellbeing. As you all know, we live today in an affluent age where society is being challenged to reassess what defines success. Currently, the prosperity of a nation is measured by GDP, or living standards. But of course, economists and governments are more and more looking to use a broader index, something about well-being, something that encompasses well-being, that goes above simply dollars. I want to bring to you a statistic that we were talking about in the news just a couple of weeks ago. 1 in 5 Australians right now is living with 2 or more chronic diseases. Now, the Turnbull government just a couple of weeks ago, which Lisa will probably be able to explain for us in greater detail, launched the plan or announced the plan for a healthier Medicare strategy. It's going to be trialled across the country. The idea is to reduce the overlaps, streamline the care for people living with chronic diseases. Right now, in Australia alone, healthcare costs from preventative diseases has reached $6 billion. That's $250 per person in this country. The cost of illness in this country is staggering, and clearly governments, particularly here in this country, are starting to recognise the importance of making a healthier population to bring down the cost associated with that. So the question is, do we create economic prosperity despite the physical and the mental wellbeing costs associated with this? Or do we build a foundation based on the well-being of people and the belief that people who are well will create economic prosperity? What comes first? That question is going to kick off today's panel, and we'll begin with Mark Tucker, the Executive Director and the Group Chief Executive Officer and President of AIA Group Limited. Mark, the question for you, research shows that having more vitality, the generic form of subjective vitality or energy, doesn't simply reduce disease and illness, it also creates new productive value through enhanced self-motivation. So do people do more, or do we produce more when we have more energy? Is that something that you found along the way?
Yeah, I think you go back to the definition of wellness and what wellness is about. And wellness is about physical, psychological, environmental, social, all different elements, and all are equally important. I think the way that we've thought about it and looked at it, this is going back to the shared value model. A win for the individual, a win for the society, and a win for the corporate, we think is the most powerful way. And in each one of those, I think what we found on the individual side, getting healthier people and the wellness consciousness and the wellness behaviours will mean a longer life, will mean less susceptibility to illness. Psychologically, it's a big difference in how, whether it's an individual or raising families, it again enhances productivity. On a corporate basis, it means reduced absenteeism, it means greater productivity at the workplace, it means less time off. All of these things are significant, and ultimately, as I'm sure Lisa will talk about, for the government, it comes down to less healthcare costs, or the healthcare costs being in the private sector. So it takes away liability from government. So you have a win-win-win model, which I think is the basis of the conversations Adrian and I have been having for many, many, many years, and the tremendous success that they've achieved.
So by looking after the individual, we can prosper collectively. Is that what you found, Adrian?
I think without doubt, the fact that kind of the risk factors have changed to almost entirely preventable illness through behaviour change has meant if you can modify that behaviour, the knock-on effects, as Marcus said, to the individual and society is absolutely remarkable. I mean, it's anecdotal to say that, and I'm sure the data will back it up, but it's that wellness leads to better productivity and happiness, but I think the knock-on effects on that in every aspect of life is so tremendous that it's just a critical battle we must win.
I want to speak to Sarah about dropping sugar, replacing sugar with just natural vitality, I suppose. What impact have you seen on the people who've signed up to your program? What has been the impact on their social and their professional output?
Yeah, I think there's a real sort of misgiving that sort of when you quit sugar, that's all you're doing is quitting sugar. And I've got to confess that the outcomes that we've observed, and we've worked with Sydney University with a team of scientists there to actually track, sort of scientifically trackable data, health outcomes, to show a bunch of things, but also 1.8 million people have done the program now around the world. And the great thing about working with an online business is that you can actually track things very, very closely, and we have a conversation, a constant, very agile, to use a Malcolm Turnbullism, sort of conversation with people. So we're actually able to see the outcomes. And I've got to say I feel a little bit guilty because the outcomes that we see, the measurable outcomes, and we're talking things like reversal of PCOS, reversal of infertility. We've got a baby book of people who were told they could never have children, and within a few weeks or months, literally, of quitting sugar, they were able to, fall pregnant. Heart disease, cholesterol readings, a whole range of things change quite dramatically when you quit sugar. But it's not just the quitting sugar, because going to your point, and I think everything that we're saying here today, or we're about to say, is that there's a ripple-on effect. So when you quit sugar, basically you go back to eating real food, because about 80 to 90% of processed food contains sugar. So you've got to quit processed food. And when you quit processed food, you quit all the preservatives, the bad oils, all the other gunk that comes with processed food. And what do? You have to learn to cook, because you're dealing with real food. And when you learn to cook, you start to take on a whole range of practices. And I know it sounds like it's minutiae that I'm talking about, but there's even just practical things like you learn to cook, and then you get sick of seeing that limp lettuce at the back of the fridge at the end of the week. It just makes you just feel, that's, that horrible guilty feeling. So then you start to get into the notion of food wastage and being really smart with the way you buy things, and you work out if you go to a farmer's market, your produce will last longer. And so then you walk to the farmer's market, and the ripple effect just goes on and on and on. And, some of the practices that I that I sort of kind of advocate is this idea that you don't have to push yourself hard. It's actually about activity and actually doing action. You know, I often say, wet paint, do not touch sign, all I want to do is touch it. And it's the same with, if you say to me, do not eat chocolate, all I'm going to want to do is eat chocolate. And you'll be glad to know chocolate and red wine are allowed on the 8-week program for that reason. Because it's a question I get asked. That's right. Because it doesn't have to be draconian. It is about small changes. It is about, and the science points to it. The 8-week program isn't just because I like the number 8. It's because the science points to, you know, addiction theory and so on, points to the fact that that is the right amount of time to get over a habit without being draconian. They used to say 21 days, but if you lapse, you had to go back to the beginning again. 60 days allows you to kind of lapse, go back, try it again, and rebuild that muscle with small tweaks. And that, I think, is key, and it ripples on. So the benefits, I think, they're there. They're there, and it goes on and on and on and on.
And something you're working on at the moment is a campaign for a sugar tax, which the UK is starting to phase in now. A lot of opposition to it in this country. I know you're building a petition at the moment, which we'll talk more about shortly, but I want to talk about government intervention, because the most successful health campaigns, I suppose, in our living memory would be things like smoking. Also road safety campaigns. There's also immunisation as well, and that has required government intervention. So the question for Lisa is, to what extent is it personal responsibility, making the right decisions, not eating too much, not smoking, not driving under the influence, all of these things, and to what extent is it up to the government to make the right choices available and affordable?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to give you a good bureaucrat's answer. It's both. Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. We've had some amazing success in Australia, and we're considered a world leader in what we've achieved in terms of smoking reduction and road safety. And if you look at the history of that, and it is very important to learn from history, that has been the result of sustained, continuous action over many, many years. You know, we started on the smoking journey from the 60s when we first got the evidence coming in that said it was so harmful, to taking out signage at the MCG when the first Vic Health campaign started, reducing advertising, putting out health warnings, putting out education campaigns. Taxes undoubtedly have played a role. All of those things over time, continuous intervention. But I think the important thing we've recognised in public health is you can't do that without community support and community demand. And governments won't act where there isn't community support and community demand, or a compelling argument to do that. And with smoking, you had all of that, and it's built and grown over time. Similarly with road safety, starting from requiring seatbelts. Australia was one of the first countries in the world that required people to wear seatbelts, required car manufacturers to put seatbelts in cars. And that built on the momentum of that through reducing speeding, random breath tests, all has come about through community support and community demand. And I think we will see the same required and enabled through government interventions in other areas of public health.
With that in mind, Sarah aside, who on this panel would be in support of a sugar tax in Australia?
Yeah. Neutral.
In South
These
Africa,
guys aren't from Australia.
South Africa and Hong Kong.
But it's interesting, we have introduced a sugar tax now, and I mean it's kind of a win-win. Even if it doesn't achieve the goals, you do get revenue, which is a good thing if it's spent on health in some way. But I mean, I guess our approach is about using incentives, which I think the private sector can only do. We don't have regulatory power. So if you can nudge people and incent them to do things, and it's complemented with government regulation and guidance, I think that's a very powerful solution.
I would just argue that it is a little bit different with sugar, and of course in South Africa the momentum there is fantastic, and over in the UK the government has recognised that the science is in and there's consumer demand for it, but the science is quite particular about sugar because it's so highly addictive. It's in the same category as tobacco in terms of it not being just a matter of individual self-control. It's beyond that. The economics, the biology and the politics of sugar are such that I think it requires intervention. Of course it requires education, but I think some things need to be we need to become educated about it via government intervention, if that makes sense. Everyone's talking about sugar again, you know, goes through peaks and troughs because we're talking about the sugar tax. And that's what I've seen happening in the UK. So that's part of my argument. And I think in terms of corporates working together on this kind of stuff, it's all part of spinning the plates, and government's got to be part of that. It can't get blindsided by food lobbyists and that kind of thing.
It's such an interesting one though, because you have such an innocent attachment to sugar, whereas alcohol and tobacco are obviously seen as pure nasties. And you look at sugar and you think birthday cakes for children and cupcakes for children and fairy bread and things like that. So there's this that's the barrier, I think, for a lot of families. But anyway, it's an interesting one in this country at the moment, so we'll see what happens.
I think the sugar tax doesn't go far enough. I know this is probably controversial, but I think rewarding people who choose healthy lifestyles is a responsibility of government, and whether that means slightly lower taxes. But I think there's a range of measures that for people to make long-term changes to their lifestyle, there needs to be a carrot there to do it. The sugar tax, great initiative. But
it's low-hanging fruit. I mean, it's kind of, we've got to start somewhere.
Absolutely.
Attacking soft drinks, and the tax, by the way, is on soft drinks alone. So it's a start, and most people agree soft drinks really offer nothing to the human condition. And so let's start there. But the thing that I argue is that the revenue, and this is what Jamie Oliver's done in the UK, and certainly the UK Parliament is looking into this, is actually using the revenue to actually fund health programs.
That's right.
And I think specifically in the UK, it's children's programs at schools. And I think that's got to be part of it, part of the messaging.
Yeah, I guess my point is that why, if the people that are choosing healthy lifestyle options that are going to make them a less burden on government resources down the track, why shouldn't they be rewarded along the way?
That idea of reward and carrots, I think, is something that Mark and Adrian can probably explain for us a bit later too, because that's something the Vitality program focuses on. Is you get reward points if you take up the offer of a gym membership, and if you go frequently and you sign in and you spend a certain number of hours. So, and it seems to be working in that case. So that's something we can cover off. Our second topic this morning is a chicken or the egg type scenario. What comes first, health or wealth? And I want to bring up a bit of research from Gallup. They hold more data on individual well-being than most nations on their citizens. They have been researching what makes people well for more than 40 years. They found that well-being is a complex mix of 5 factors, including physical health, social relationships, community belonging, purposeful work, and financial security. They also found the key is that all these domains are interrelated. No one factor will give you full well-being, and they all affect each other, of course, mutually. So while being healthy is key, of course, to building overall well-being, it's more complex than that, and health and wealth are highly connected. So good health habits can influence good financial habits. Research also says that people with higher financial security lead healthier lives, which is an interesting one. So Richard, running the best fitness club across this country at the moment, you are constantly in contact with people who are living healthy and wealthy lives, of course. As someone from outside the financial services sector though, what correlation do you see between health and wealth?
Look, statistics tell us there's an obvious correlation between good health and wealth. I'm not smart enough to figure out whether wealth creates health or health creates
wealth.
Yeah.
Wealth and health. Health and wealth.
What I do know is that just looking at the raw statistics, I think it doesn't give us the true story. I think it's a far more complex cause and effect rationale that needs to be looked at. What I do know is that right now in Australia, there's more information available to everybody. There's more facilities and activities that people can get involved with at no cost, up to reasonably priced activities. So as a society, we have everything at our fingertips to make better choices. To me, people still make bad choices, and that's what it comes down to. I'm trying to be politically correct here and not going.
No, don't worry about that. Tell us what you really think.
Well, people make bad choices with their movement. I mean, I love what you talk about with movement. people say to how many times do you go to the gym? I might go 4 times a month.
Yeah.
But I exercise every day.
Yeah.
People need to move. And I won't take up the floor too long because I could talk on this forever about how I believe. I mean, Rob De Castella is a person that everybody knows, and I was having coffee with Rob about 2 months ago, and for the last 12 to 15 years, one of Rob's programs has been trying to get into primary school settings and increase the physical activity of children. And he actually said to me, he said, you know, I'm almost giving up. I just don't seem to get the traction that we need to get. So it's a very complex problem, and I'm not smart enough to have all the answers.
60% of millennial women, or girls I should say, don't do any exercise or movement at all. You know, and that is absolutely frightening. And schools are so, I agree, I do the same thing with trying to get healthy food into canteens. The resistance is unbelievable. They just don't want to be involved in the change. It's all too hard.
Yeah.
Well, with a federal budget coming up in a couple of weeks, hooray, how exciting. Superannuation is a hot topic at the moment. So Tavi, how do you see that the superannuation industry at the moment can help us on these fronts?
Yeah, thanks, Sylvia. There's a couple of areas that I think that superannuation can really play a part. And I'll just refer briefly to some of the research that we have done over the past 18 months or so with some of our claimants of total and permanent disability claims. So these are people who have been assessed as being totally and permanently disabled, and what we've actually found out of this research is that about a third of these people have said to us that they have spent money on medical assistance and other sorts of services in order to get back to work. And about a third of those are in fact either back at work or actively looking for work. So there's a very definite relationship there between, you know, people don't want to be away from work, and we talked about it as being part of that social part of being of well-being in total. That they do actually want to be back at work. And one of the really astounding things was that about 2/3 of the people in this research said that what they wanted their fund to do was to actually help them with retraining in order to get them back to work. Because we all know that there are enormous benefits of being active at work, and if we can get people back to work and off claim, then they're going to earn more money, they're actually going to get to a better retirement lifestyle, they're actually going to be much healthier by the time they get there. So we've really been looking at that research and saying, what is it that we need to do? And we've been working on the way in which we think about our services and the way that we think about insurance cover for all of our million members, to say, what is it that we need to do and how do we need to participate in getting these people back to work? One of the comments that came out of that research was, when I needed you most, you left me. Because we paid out the claim and then they were on their own, and that was actually what they needed help with. So I think that there's a lot that we can do as an industry, and certainly as an organisation. We're looking at what we can do, and we're certainly looking forward to rolling out some new services around that area very, very soon. The other area that I'll just talk about briefly is our relationship and the relationship that we have with AIA as our group life insurer with a mental health foundation called Superfriend. And this is a foundation which was set up by a number of superannuation funds because we were looking at some of our claims history and saying we have too many suicide claims and we have an increasing number of mental health claims that are resulting in TPD claims. And we really said that's unacceptable and we need to do something about that. So we look at the financial side of some of these things. Superfriend has a whole range of programs that we can roll out to workplaces that are based around healthy people at work, wellbeing at work, a much broader thinking about mental health in the workplace. They have a transition to retirement program that really looks about what are the much more mental health side of things. You know, we think about the financial side of getting to retirement. They can help us with getting into workplaces and thinking about, you know, all of the other things. People typically think about have I got enough money to retire on, but am I well enough? And what am I going to do in my retirement that's going to keep my mind active?
Well, especially when we're all thinking about retiring later and later and later
Absolutely.
in life.
Absolutely.
So it may be worth just in supporting Tavi's comment. I think in the role of the insurance industry, and I think this is continuing to evolve and has done so since ancient Egyptian days, so it's not evolving and innovating is not anything new. But I think it's important that and I think wellness as a category, and I'm sure Adrian will talk more about it, but wellness as a category is a major change in the industry, and I think the psychology of the insurance industry has been, I think, as Tavi said, is that you die or you get in an accident, we pay. The psychology needs to move, that we are there to help you live longer, better, healthier lives. And that's a major change in psychology, major change in direction. But I think it's significant as part of supporting that journey.
Now, when we talk about the government and the big challenges facing the government in this sector, of course, one of the big challenges is balancing community expectations with a pretty dire-looking budget at the moment. So how do policy makers, Lisa, advise the government on what to prioritise, how to prioritise, at a time when we are being told this country is tightening its belt?
Well, it's very hard, and it's actually one of the hardest parts of my job, is that the compelling requests and ideas are always far more than the available budget. And I'm just the bureaucrat behind the minister, and the minister is the one, and the government are the ones that have to make the really hard choices. But I guess we try to think about a balance between creating that compelling and enabling environment for community action, not just government action. We look at the evidence, and that's critical, and that is something that we're always trying to keep on top of, and it's hard because it's a very fast-moving world these days. And being ready for those opportunities that come along where something changes in the environment, the government decides it really wants to act on something, and we're ready with the evidence to support that. How to get the balance right, I think, it's a judgment call, and we serve our political masters in making that, but we try to support them with the best possible evidence about getting the right balance between the health and the wealth, the mental health and the physical health, the food, the physical activity, the risk factors. And it's always going to be arguable whether we got that quite right, but we are trying our best.
Now, Adrian, I want to come to you first on conversation 3. Why should the financial services sector care about our well-being? Of course, the question is, why would a financial services company like AIA invest so much, not only in their customers but also their staff, with their link through Vitality? There is an argument, of course, to suggest that encouraging people to exercise regularly, to stop smoking, to eat healthier foods, to move, to cut sugar, to do all these great things is going to reduce the cost of chronic disease, and that will help all Australians and people everywhere to control the cost of insurance, which is under significant pressure, like all healthcare resources. Adrian, you created Vitality. You've been working very closely now with AIA for a long time. You created Vitality more than 20 years ago to improve health and reduce the costs of insurance. What's been the evidence in your experience that a wellbeing program has worked?
Well, the evidence is, I think, incredibly compelling. So our data shows that people that are engaged in the program typically illustrate 10 to 20% lower healthcare costs, 30 to 35% lower mortality rates. So the effect is profound. But I mean, to get to the start of it, there is an interesting question that I think you have to ask. If 90% of mortality is based on illnesses caused by simple behaviour choices, ignoring the addiction for the moment, because I think that's a complicated issue, but simple behaviour choices, why is it that people don't make the right choices? You know, and the answer is, I think we know now from behavioural economics that people have this need for instant gratification. So when it comes to healthcare, the benefits are immediate. They see, they get treated at a hospital, whatever, but the price is typically free. It's paid for by government or paid for by the insurer, so they're over demand. When it comes to wellness and choices about avoiding sugar, going for a run, going to the gym, the price is high. You know, I'd like to have that coffee full of sugar, right? So there's a price, and the benefits are 40 years down the line. So we know that people have this, they call it hyperbolic discounting. People don't make rational choices. So when you understand that, then the key is how do you change those choices? Either you regulate, which I think you have to do in some way, or use incentives and education. And I would argue, and it's to Mark's point, that the financial services sector we monetize health. That's what we do. We're taking a risk on mortality or morbidity, and if people live longer or healthier, we make more money. And therefore, I think our breakthrough is that they have shared value. We have a social role to play in using that surplus to fund incentives to get behaviour change. And essentially, I think that transforms our industry from one of just the transactional nature of paying claims to one where we are using surplus to get people to change behaviour. The change behaviour drives surplus, and we get this virtuous cycle. And therefore, I think it's part of a puzzle together with regulation, together with the kinds of things Sarah is doing that I think is incredibly powerful in making people healthier. But I think it's a profound use of resources to change societal health.
Mark, your customers are seeing benefits from the Vitality program. They're getting greater access to discounts. They're getting, obviously, greater health and wellbeing as well along the way. And that is just a few examples. But what benefits have you seen in your company as a result of giving those incentives to your customers?
Well, I mean, I think the purpose, and we say our core purpose as an organisation is to help the social and economic development across the Asia region. And that's where we start. Insurance companies have unique positioning in that respect, both on the asset and the liability side. On the asset side, we have the ability to invest long in infrastructure, in bonds. In the future, our liability profile is many years, 25 to 50 years into the future. So we have the ability to invest long. The asset management industry is 15, 20 minutes. Ours is 15, 25, 40 years. That is incredibly powerful in terms of, just you can take AIA as an example. We own 23, 24% of all debt ever issued by the Thai government today. We are major bondholders in every government across this region. We've supported the development of the yield curve across the region. It's incredibly powerful. We're the biggest infrastructure investors. We own $40 billion US of infrastructure investment across the Asia-Pacific region. These elements are material on the asset side. On the liability side, I think it's to Dieter's points, we can take away the burdens of government, the ageing burdens of pensions. We can take away the healthcare cost. Healthcare across Asia up to, I think it's up to 2020, the compound annual growth rate is expected, the cost of healthcare is expected to go at 41% per annum compound. Wow. 41%, which goes into the trillions. So this enormous gap between what people have in their coverage and what they need in supporting government, and therefore I think that's where we start the whole process. And then you get down to the individual, and to Adrian's points, when you understand what you eat and what you drink, whether you exercise and whether you smoke, leads to 60% of all deaths. It's startling that this, as a statistic, is incredibly powerful. And if you can motivate your customers, and we have close to 50 million customers across the Asia-Pacific region, if you can motivate your customers, I say there's a benefit to the company, but there's a benefit to the individual, and there's a benefit to society. And that win-win-win is just incredibly powerful.
Well, on the topic of motivation, when we look at superannuation, it can be very hard to look ahead, to those years in your life and be thinking about pouring money into your superannuation when you've got to think about a house, when you've got to think about sending your kids to school or university, about grandchildren then, and the costs are mounting. How do you motivate people to think seriously about their superannuation when it seems so distant?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and an age-old problem for all superannuation funds. I think the challenge for us and the way that we think about it is how do we become relevant in the everyday lives of our members? So talking to a 25-year-old about their retirement date or how much money they're going to have in retirement is not a very exciting or engaging prospect for them. It's hard enough to get people who are approaching 50 to think about it. So we have really thought about it in terms of how do we be relevant where and when our members are, regardless of how old they are. So a couple of things that we've embarked on. We have a rewards program which is about being relevant and providing discounts on things that are relevant for people today. This was a program that we rolled out late last year, and one of the incentives that was a part of that program was in fact Fitbits, which is highly topical for today. And so we had access to an organisation that was selling Fitbits before Christmas at a discount, sold out in absolutely no time, because it was about being relevant and being there at that point in time. And the purpose of that rewards program is not just about having those discounts, it's about how we think about lowering the everyday expenses of all of our members, giving them access to the right kinds of things that are in fact going to make a difference to their health and well-being, and as a side benefit of that they'll have a bit of cash left over that they might just put into their superannuation. So we think about things much more in that sort of a context. We also have an education program that we call the Dream Project. And that gets distributed via our website. It also gets distributed via social media. So again, it's about engaging our members in something that is relevant to them, not necessarily relevant to us, because we have to get them there in the first place and get them having a conversation, and then we can move them to the place where we really want them to be, which is to start thinking about what are the decisions they need to make about their financial security and getting to, as we say, fulfilling their retirement dreams.
Having a conversation is something that you know all about, because until you kind of came on the scene in this country with the I Quit Sugar program, no one was talking about it because it was still... It wasn't a nice idea that anyone wanted to attach themselves to. But now there's this great conversation, and it's not just you, there are other people in your industry who are doing the same thing, and it's becoming more acceptable. So making something acceptable and normal seems to be the way to make it mainstream, I suppose.
Totally agree. Yeah. Sorry.
How did you start the conversation?
Yeah. Before I entered into this realm and the business started, I first quit sugar in January 2011, and sort of the business proper began 3.5 years ago in terms of an online business. The books started earlier than that. But prior to that, my former life, I was a journalist for 20 years and I was the editor of Cosmo. So I knew how I've got a sort of an ability to talk to the mainstream, I suppose, and particularly that demographic that you're trying to get on board, 25-year-old women. And generally I say you've got to make things sexy, which is a very Cosmo term. And we used to try to work hard to make superannuation sexy. But
we've found a way.
Yeah, we've worked on it. Interestingly, and I was going to pick up on this when you were talking about it, is that I think people are interested in science. I think they need that. I think that they need to feel confirmed by it. And I guess my skill has always been taking complex science, complex ideas, and taking them to the masses in a way that's approachable and very much everyday, how they can apply it to their own lives. One of the good things that I try to share is that with quitting sugar, there is good news. You can actually reverse a lot of the effects that sugar has caused on your metabolism fairly quickly. And in the space of 2 weeks, for instance, a lot of the damage to your skin can actually be reversed, which is fantastic for my program because 2 weeks in, people's vanity is appealed to and they want to keep going and going. So wrinkles and pimples start to fade, and the science that backs that is certainly there. But I think that talking about longevity is actually something that also is a conversation that young people are very open to, again, partly because of vanity. And I've done a fair bit of work with National Geographic, the team that looks into longevity. I don't know if any of you have heard of the Blue Zones, Okinawa, Sardinia and a few other places around the world where people live the longest. And I've travelled to these areas and worked with the team on what lifestyle practices they have in place that make a difference. And I can tell you that young people are really interested in this dialogue. It's got to be about storytelling. It's got to be about real life anecdotes. And there is really an interest in it. And, one of the other aspects that I apply, just to answer your question, Sylvia, is it can't be draconian. Going back to the wet paint sign, we as humans are programmed to do and not to stop behaviour. So I work very much with this notion of the positive. Unfortunately, my business is called I Quit Sugar, which is not the most positive mantra, but it's I quit sugar, I gave it a go. If you want to try it, hey, this could help you. It's not you must quit sugar. And I've never once told anyone to quit sugar. Not once. My partner eats Cocoa Pops every morning for breakfast and has a paddle pop after dinner every single night, and I'm not going to be the person to tell him to quit sugar. So I think there's some of those principles, and you know, there's a lot of addiction theory that backs this notion of one incremental change at a time and a gentle change. It doesn't have to be hardcore gym sessions, although I'm sure that would help your message, but it's about walking to work. It's those gentle, doable things, and they do turn the beast around. So that's kind of how I try to tell the story. Make it sexy.
I sat next to you, Sarah, at a function last year at that Women's Weekly event, and they brought around the dessert at the end of the night, and mine came in front of me, and I think I inhaled it in -5 seconds. And Sarah didn't say anything to me. She didn't look at me. There was no judgment. But in my mind, I'm sitting there thinking, I'm sitting next to the woman who is a leader in quitting sugar, in living a better lifestyle, and I just inhaled my cheesecake faster than you can say, oh, I quit sugar. So, and I think that for me was a moment where I stopped and thought, why am I eating this so rapidly, as though it's going to jump off my plate? I need to pin it down before it disappears. No, it was one of those moments where you kind of realise that you're doing this unnecessarily. You're doing it as a crutch, and you're doing it for gratification.
See, I would have taken the opportunity to have yours as well.
Yeah, that's right.
I do that with everyone.
Missed opportunity.
I do that with everyone's main course, so yeah.
And then run home.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly right.
At a point, the data we've seen shows that certain aspects have like a trigger event. In other words, you don't have to attack every aspect in the wellness spectrum. So we've seen when people get physically active, that starts them thinking about, should I quit sugar? Should I stop smoking? Should I think about things differently? So
the same with consumers. They don't have to do everything at once. And I use the notion of a knotted ball of wool. Just start somewhere, and it looses that gnarly knotted ball of wool that a lot of us feel about our health. Like, I just don't know where to start, but it's such a mess. And so I agree with you. Start somewhere. It doesn't have to be this big, onerous task.
Richard, when did you open your first Anytime Fitness in Wollongong?
No, that was my first health club.
That was your first health club?
30 years ago. But
so first Anytime Fitness?
Anytime was 7 years ago.
And how many do you have now?
428.
And what have you seen change in that period of time with people taking up gym memberships and their use of their gym memberships?
We're becoming better as an industry on helping people, not so much motivate them to make that initial decision to come along, but definitely to help them stay motivated. We, when I started 30 years ago, if someone came in and said, I'm going to come to the gym 4 times a month, we would have said, well, that's a good start, but you need to get to 12 times a month or whatever. We now know that if someone innately is going to want to come to the health club 4 times a month, we need to make that. They're not going to change that part of their lifestyle. So we need to become the activities that they do when they're at our clubs need to be stickier. So encouraging them to stay and do activities that they enjoy, not things that we want them to do. We need to introduce them to social networks that are active both within the club and externally. Community, I think someone used the term before, and generally support the people, not just when they're within our facilities, but provide the support networks when they're outside of the facilities. And the big enhancement has obviously been social media. Which has benefited our industry tremendously.
Look, I want to take this chance now. We've discussed some of the issues and the problems, I suppose, facing both the wellbeing, the health and the financial sectors. So where do we go in making changes, and what are some of the things that we can implement now? First of all, Adrian, I know that wearable technology, Fitbits, which we've already spoken about, and things like that, are quite important to your program. How do you see them making big changes down the track?
Well, listen, I think that physical activity is such an important aspect as a trigger event, and I think the data shows that the dose effect of exercise is so powerful on mortality and every aspect. So I think these wearable devices, although they're still embryonic, are linking them into insurance and getting real incentives from them. So the program in Vitality gives you every week a goal. If you achieve it, you get I mean, it's a Boost juice here in Australia, but a Starbucks coffee in London, whatever it might be. It is amazing how people respond to these kind of short-term, real-time incentives. So I think getting those kinds of methodologies baked into different kinds of products, financial services, in a much more rigorous, actuarially sound way, I think will create a shared value model that is sustainable. And I think that physical activity itself is such a powerful wellness tool as a trigger event that I think the focus on it is entirely appropriate. So I think it's embryonic, but it's something we should pursue.
Everybody knows the human body is meant to move. There wouldn't be such a natural release of hormones that make you actually feel good. That wouldn't be in our body if it wasn't meant to be used, and it's only used when we do activity at a certain level and certain frequency. So biology tells us that the body is meant to move. Unfortunately, I see it more and more. I just think Western society is unfortunately still slipping away. And I applaud the AIA guys for really trying to make a definitive change to motivate people to go the other way.
Well, Mark, how would you motivate other senior managerial people in managerial positions to adopt the same kind of approach that you have taken at AIA? How do you sell it to them?
I think again we go back to helping society, helping communities that we operate in, helping the government in supporting some of their burdens. I think it's all behavioural science. I mean, it's for individuals to take accountability, and you can't force anybody down a path. And I think government intervention. I'm not a fan of government intervention in almost anything. I think it's got to be done. I think government can come and support when there is the mass and there is the support, but I think intervening unless there's clearly real issues, I think is counterproductive. I'd rather markets work it out when there was the momentum. So I think it's such a compelling story that it's a win for everybody. And I think just the more that we talk about it, the more that it gets out, the more that people can see. Now we can find, Tybee can find within the super sector solutions to get, if you get 1 million people active and encouraged, engaged. And I think you started off when Australia is the avoidable, effectively, healthcare costs per annum are 6 billion plus. Now that's a pretty good start. So I think the motivation needs to come from within. Otherwise, it cannot be forced, it cannot be presented. But I think if you can encourage, and the Vitality Scheme, the AIA Vitality Scheme works where you'll get a substantial discount on your premium, which is dynamically priced into the behaviours that you will do in the future. So you'll get that discount, you'll get major gym discounts, you'll get major food discounts, healthy food discounts, you get a rewards program on top of that. Nobody else has put it together as Adrian and his team have and been successful, and I think this is what's encouraging to us, and I think is encouraging to so many of the people, our own teams. We have substantial employees and agents, and we prototype before we put it into the community. We prototype it ourselves, and we see ourselves within our own business. The productivity levels, the activity levels, the absentee levels have all improved.
Well, let's go from there into perhaps our final nuggets of wisdom or hopes for the future. Lisa, it's an election year, it's an important time in this country. What would be perhaps your hopes for the next, let's say, 5 years? What would be the biggest changes you would hope to see over the next 5 years?
Well, I actually find myself agreeing, not surprisingly, with my fellow panellists here. I actually think, and I've been in this business in public health and behaviour change efforts for many years now, but I've increasingly come to think that physical activity is a great entry point for businesses, for government, for public health advocates, because it is something that involves us all. It's not pointing the finger at fat people, it's not pointing the finger at people that smoke and saying you must, you should. It's actually something that no matter who we are or what we do or how healthy we are, we all have to engage with. And that could be an argument for not having government intervention, but I think there is still a role for governments in collaboration with communities to create an enabling environment. And I think we've got to remember that for many people there are still a lot of barriers to engaging with health. You know, there are very vulnerable people in our communities, people that are very stressed by life, and we need to create an array of options for them, whether it's just walking the dog before bedtime. That's a start. And I think, to go to Sarah's earlier point about the ripple effect, I think physical activity has a great ripple effect. You start to see results, you start to feel better through those hormonal responses, and then you start to engage with food, you start to think about your smoking habit, you start to think about what your kids are doing and what they're eating. And we've just run a campaign, Girls Make Your Move, which has had a great response from the community. But you know, we can build on that and target all sorts of vulnerable groups. Teenage girls are one group where we know physical activity just drops off. Various pressures, boys, studies, other things that lead to losing that momentum. And one of the roles, I think, for government and the education sector will be how to keep that momentum, how to create spaces for people to exercise in, how to create information that gives them that compelling argument to engage. So it's a bit of a personal view, but I think it's a bit of a win-win for many parts of this puzzle.
Yeah, well, it begins with changing habits. That's your area of expertise, Sarah. Where do you start? What's the psychological...
Well, I could say with quitting sugar, but I won't because I don't do that. But just to your point, Lisa, I think that one thing that I'm very aware of, and again, you know, I'm obsessed by the science in this area and it's just growing and growing, is that we don't necessarily just talk about exercise, we talk about movement. And one thing that I'm seeing big food draw on as they get cornered is this notion that it's calories in, calories out. So have your, you know, fizzy drink, your sweet fizzy drink. However, just go off and work hard in the gym to burn it off. And that is actually not how our bodies work. And I'm actually really trying to educate people that that is not how we should be seeing things. And it's a way of, I think, people who are in positions of responsibility to abdicate responsibility. It's not how our bodies operate. But one thing I would say is that movement, and it sort of goes to my next point, is that we don't have to make it so draconian and difficult. I actually do believe in small things actually making the biggest impact. So walking every day is all you have to do. Just do it every day because the habits actually build. It builds a muscle in your brain that keeps going. And I was just going to say, I think I applaud what AIA are doing, even at the micro level. I mean, I sort of absorb some of the things that the company is doing, but with staff, I think you've reduced the number of meeting rooms but supplied picnic blankets out around the building so that staff can go out and have an outdoor meeting. To me, that is far more important, and I would imagine far more effective and enticing than kind of giving, you know, 20% off a running program or something. I think that is where change happens. So from my point of view, what I would like to see Australia do is learn to cook. Because that is where I think real change happens, because you get fired up, you start accessing stuff your grandmother used to do, you think it's kind of cool to start fermenting and making your own, you know, slow cooker, ossobuco, and you show your friends on Instagram and it ripples, ripples, ripples. That is how change happens. And Michael Pollan, who's a big hero of mine, he once said, in far less eloquent terms, if you want to stick it up big food, learn how to cook.
Yeah, simple as that.
He didn't quite say it like that, they're my crass words, but yeah.
Tybee, we are running out of time, but what's your hope for the next 5 years? What would be the biggest change you'd like to see in the superannuation industry?
Oh gosh.
Just one.
I'll keep it relevant for today, I think, and my comment would be that I would add to that, because I don't think it's just about the physical. I think there is a very large part of it which is about the mental as well, and that's what I would like to see, that there's much more of a focus on to have a much more holistic approach to both health and wealth, and in fact bringing those things together much more closely, so that we think about them in totality, because it really, for us as an industry where most of what we do is people at work and getting them ready for after work, it's about that total work relationship. So at an individual level, at an organisation level, and ultimately at a social level, as Mark was talking about. So I would hope that we take a much more holistic view of that, and and our industry thinks a lot more about the wealth and health going together and not just being an adjunct to it.
Richard, your final thoughts for the day?
And I know I haven't got much time because I can see the...
Oh, we can go a little bit longer. I'm the boss of that now. Damien.
I hear the word motivation bandied around a lot, and my opinion is that we don't actually motivate people to make change. We are there when people have what I've called for 25 years a moment of inspiration in their life. And that is when an event triggers them to want to make change in their life. Maybe a young relative dies, or they see old photos or whatever. Something really motivates that person to want to make change. We in this room have a responsibility to be at the front of their mind when people have those moments of inspiration. They might get one every 5 years, they might get 50 a year, but we need to be at the front of their mind. We need to have non-intimidating options for people when they do have that moment of inspiration, they want to make a change. We need to educate them. So I know we're doing a good job, but we have a lot more education too. We need to get more science out there, and starting at the ground levels. I respectfully disagree that government doesn't have a role. I believe they have a massive role to play, and I believe it needs to start at the primary school level, where we have kids educating their parents on and look, my kids won't eat McDonald's. They refuse to eat McDonald's, and I joke about it with them, and let's go to McDonald's. They hate it, and that's because of the repeated message. My wife shows all the YouTube videos and etc. that scare them. So look, as a group,
Scare tactics work.
Yeah, they do. We have a hard job in front of us, but we've got to stand up and make a change.
Yeah. There are a lot of heads nodding, so I think you're speaking to the people there, Richard. Adrian, I want to finish with you. Vitality is really leading the way in this interconnectivity, I suppose. That is the way forward, it seems, for the health, for the financial, for the wellbeing sectors. Where do you see it going in the next 10 years?
I'm hoping that, I think we're leading the way. I'm hoping that we transform insurance industries into actually focusing on, I think what Mark was saying, not being a transaction-based industry, but using literally the tens of billions that flow through us to get behaviour change. I think we are in a serious battle against non-communicable diseases. I don't think people have internalised just how the change has taken place from infectious diseases to behaviour. And the opportunity of our industry, I think globally, to make people healthier is so compelling. So I'm hoping in 10 years, maybe not a great hope for our competitive position, but all insurers use that financial power to incent and drive change. We're part of a global movement. I think it's remarkably exciting.
It is indeed. Adrian, Lisa, Mark, Sarah, Tyvee and Richard, thank you so much for all of your comments, your insight today. I'm sure you all agree it's been very interesting, and I hope you've all got a lot out of it as well, and to those, of course, streaming online as well. And it's a great insight, I think, into where all these industries are going in the future, and hopefully what will lead to a more prosperous community for us all. It is my great pleasure now to welcome back to the stage Damien, and to thank you all again for being with us today.
Thank you very much, everyone. Look, there was one panel member who was meant to be here with us today, but due to travel reasons, we weren't able to be here. So they've actually delivered a video message for us. So if you can just bear with us, we've got the video for a couple of minutes from Damien Hill, the CEO of Superannuation, and his message around vitality, and then a couple of thank yous from me, and then I promise you can all go for a run and eat healthily. So can we just play that video, please, and then thank you.
REST represents around 2 million Australians, of which a little over 1.3 million of them have life insurance. But if we look at the whole industry, we represent over 12 million Australians and almost all employers in the economy. So we have a great responsibility. There's lots of studies that show for employers that, a healthy workforce is actually a far more productive workforce. If we look at what life expectancy is doing, it's increasing, and it's not much point having increased life expectancy unless you've got the health there. And you only get the health there if you look after your health all the way through your life. And so that's why we see that there's this natural connection between saving for retirement but looking at the healthy aspects of life all the way through. Indeed, a few weeks ago we launched the AIA Vitality program to 150 staff. So This involved a lot of communication up front and getting them Fitbits so that they could get to know their health. So I'm afraid to say that my kids got their Fitbits before I did, so I'm only catching up in my family, but I'm learning every day a little bit more about my own health and the practices that I can put in place. We see this as part of making sure that being an employee is not just about us and you in the workplace. Everyone brings something from home to work and vice versa, take something from work back home. And it's important to look at our staff holistically in that regard and how can we support them and their families and make sure that we're part of a cohesive, happy, productive family of our own. We are so much into that same mindset. An example from our side of the fence is with regard to advice. We're at the forefront of providing advice to our members, little bite-sized pieces, because what we want to do is to actually get them to change their behaviour financially, and the miracle of compound interest means their benefit down the track is much greater. I see the Vitality program as being exactly the same, but on the health side of things, that making those small changes up front lead to huge changes down the track. I'm hoping that the financial services industry realises the role that it can play through the trusted relationships that it has with its members and employers, but also that behind this program there is actually a business case. There is a business case to say how this pays off for both employers who participate and for their underlying employees. So it's a win-win scenario, and that we have a role in making sure it gets distributed far and wide.
Thank you. Damien was very passionate about that and wanted to make sure his message got across. So thank you, Damien, wherever you are, and we'll get the message to you. But thank you very much for your time this morning. Firstly, I want to thank Sylvia Jeffries for doing a fantastic job as facilitator and host. So thank you, Sylvia. I think not only doing a great job, but sharing your personal story is very much appreciated. It's not part of the gig, so but I think it actually translates very well. So the authenticity. So thank you. Obviously, to our panel members for your insights, and hopefully we've been able to achieve our objective today around the three that I talked about earlier. Thank you for your insights and participation. I would like to also thank Mark for coming out and being obviously Australia is part of his remit, but supporting us here to make a difference in people's lives through what we do. And you can hear the passion he has for what the role of insurance has towards improving health. Adrian coming out from South Africa to really spread his passion around the vision to transform health outcomes for individuals and deal to the issues. And Vitality has 6 million people globally who are living longer, happier lives, healthier lives because of the work that Adrian and his team have done. And once again to Tyvee, Richard, Dr. Lisa Stoddard and to Sarah for sharing your fantastic insights. And we're all going to go back and make some change. And if you want to. And if you don't, we're coming for you. So finally, I also want to thank the team at AIA. We call ourselves the Army of MAD, making a difference, and we wear that badge of honour on our sleeves every day. And the team that put it together, so all of the team at AIA, and in particular Amy and Pete and Renee, the team, thank you. And to all of our partners, we in Australia need our superannuation partners, our financial advisors, our bank partners or member organisations to actually reach those 3.5 million Australians to ensure they have protection. Without you, we cannot do it, and we never lose sight of that. So my final call to you today is that this is a recruitment drive, and I have a very bold vision that we make Australia the healthiest nation in the world. And I think we can do that because I've looked at not just the evidence, but the fact that we do have the great infrastructure we do that I talked about earlier. Access to things we take for granted, clean water, great food, clean food, choices, education, a manageable sized population, and a connectedness through the technology and communication we have today. Now, when we then couple that with the relationships we have with every working Australian through, and then the evidence that says there are 3 lifestyle choices that we can make a small difference in to change that dynamic, I recruit all of you to help me on that journey, and the team at AIA to go back out there and help Australia become the healthiest nation in the world, and we will do it. And the last thing I will leave you with is that this is a legacy that goes well into the future. And if in our time, that if we compare it to a 100-metre race, we can take that baton 10 metres forward, then we have started that, because it wasn't until someone said we can get to the moon that it actually was achievable. So we are going to be the healthiest nation, and all of us are going to start that today. So thank you very much for being here, and I look forward to working in to achieve that goal and ambition. Thank you. One last thing, because I do like the sound of my own voice in this microphone, is I do want to thank all the partners on the Vitality program. So obviously Anytime Fitness, there is a range of them: Fitness First, Virgin, Fitbit, Garmin, there's Chemmart, Alan Carr Quit Smoking, Dietitians Australia. There is a range of people that are coming together around a common vision here. Our reward partners, Endota, Hoyts, it just goes on. So I do not want to not recognise the great work that they're doing to support the program, and look forward to their continued support. Thank you very much.